Hey everybody, this is Andy Hall. You're watching Best Advice Ever, the show where great people come on and talk about the best advice they ever got. Today's guest is Thomas Westbrook. He runs the Holy Koolaid YouTube channel. It has well over 110,000 subscribers and close to 11 million views. Thomas, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm feeling fantastic. How are you?
Feeling fantastic. I'm feeling pretty good myself. I got some Diet Coke in me. I feel like all pistons are relatively running. And so I'm feeling good.
My drug of choice right here.
Oh, very good. Very good. I was on LinkedIn and saw your account, and I saw that you had a post about your upcoming Faithless Forum.
Yes, we do have a conference coming up.
Now, is that the third one that you guys have done?
It is. We had one, at first it was just supposed to be like a meet and greet. To give your listeners an idea of what the Faithless Forum is it's a conference that's organized entirely by atheists, skeptic, and humanist and free thought YouTubers for people who are interested in getting their voice out there or getting more involved in the community. So if there's someone who maybe they're frustrated because they feel like they're being denigrated left and right by family, by pastors, by politicians, or maybe they feel like their rights are being taken away, then we're a place where you can come and not just have a feeling of, not being alone and knowing that you have a community, but also a place where you can learn how you can also get your voice out there, where you can see people who are doing it, where you can, potentially either support activists or become one yourself, or just be around people who you love watching on YouTube. And the first year we sold about 70 tickets. We had just kind of a meet and greet with fans. It was just supposed to be a handful of people. We wound up selling 70 tickets. All of our VIP tickets sold out. The second year, all of our tickets for the entire thing sold out within the first 5 weeks, months before the conference. So this year I think we had about 170. So it was about double, a little more than double. And then this year we're shooting for 500. And the hype for it, I have to say, it's off the charts. And
I took a look at some of the guests that you're having, some of the speakers. A very impressive display, sir. A very impressive list.
Thank you. Yeah, it's it's not the typical conference lineup. So a lot of times conferences within, especially within the skeptic community, will have, PhDs and intellectuals and stuff from different universities. And because our conference isn't necessarily it's not specifically geared towards intellectuals, and we do try to educate as much as we can, but we also are about entertaining. We're also about providing community. We're also about showing people how they can get involved in YouTube, which is kind of more the, I guess, artistic side of communication. So we want to have those intellectual voices, and some of the YouTubers do have a significant academic background, but we're not just stacking our conference full of PhDs and academics. We're giving people platforms who don't necessarily get to go and talk at the conference circuit. And they've just been in this long enough. They've built a following. They know how to entertain. They know how to make videos. And we're saying, hey, we want you at our conference.
It sounds like you have a real opportunity for real world information, a how-to experience on how to get on the platform and to get your message out there.
And this is perfect too for maybe you have someone who is, a paleontologist or a geologist or biologist or physicist, and they have an expertise in a particular field, but they don't know how to operate a camera to save their lives. They don't know how to go on YouTube. They don't know that they can just take their phone and live stream if they want to. They don't know that just how easy it can be. Or maybe they want to find a community because they see that people are making videos where, they're trying their best, but they're like, hey, I could help with my expertise to, review scripts, or to, be a soundboard to bounce ideas off of, or to help, review information before it goes out there to make sure that it's accurate. Then, those people, they can come to the Faithless Forum and get plugged in with the content creators, and you build this active community that it's a really powerful tool when it comes to, to getting information out there.
Right. So you want to talk about, who are some of the guests that you have that are showing up?
Well, I'll pull up the list real quick, but first off, we have Seth Anders of the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. So he's been on the speakers list for a while, as well as Matt Dillahunty. We also have Shannon Q, Rationality Rules, Paula Gia, Jenna Belk, who's one of the new hosts of the Atheist Experience in Austin, Owen Morgan, who has a channel called Telltale Prophet of Zod, Eric Murphy, who has the show Talk Heathen, as well as just started his own YouTube channel. Vila Bianca is also a host of Talk Heathen, Genetically Modified Skeptic. Chris Shelton, who's a former Scientologist. We have a couple of former Jehovah's Witnesses, including Ex-Cult Baby, John Cedars, and there's a YouTuber named Mentally Diseased.
Yep.
Ali Rizvi's an ex-Muslim. We have Rachel Oates, Adam the Atheist, Surus, Neil the 604 Atheist, who will basically just talk to people about their deconversion stories and hear their journey out of religion start to finish. Objectively Dan, who has an ACA show called Truth Wanted, and then of course myself.
Sure.
I think that's everybody that we have confirmed right now, although we have a few others who are very interested in going, who are I'm not going to officially announce until they're set in stone.
I understand. That is a wise choice. We've talked about the Faithless Forum. You want to talk a little bit about your own YouTube channel?
What would you like to know?
If someone is watching for the first time, they have a vague idea that you're about skepticism and maybe about science. Maybe you want to talk about the best video you ever did or your favorite video you ever shot.
Oh, that's hard. That's very hard. With all of my videos, just to give people an idea of what my channel is and what I'm about, I make videos oftentimes animated that are laser focused, where I take a complex topic and I try to dive into it. Now, my first love is science. I want to know how the world works, and I think that we can figure out, to a pretty good degree, we can figure out what is and isn't true. I don't think that we can have absolute certainty about things purely philosophically speaking, but I don't think that knowledge necessarily requires 100% certainty. And I think we can use the scientific method to get a pretty good idea of what's true, coupled with Occam's razor and a couple other tools. And so when I make my videos, I try to take an idea, like, did the universe come from nothing? Is it fine-tuned for life? Do psychic phenomena exist? How can we test these claims? And I try to not just say this is true or this is what we know. I try to show why we know what we know. So, for example, if some, a scientist says the Earth isn't 6,000 years old, well, how do we know that? Okay, they'll say, well, radiometric dating. Okay, that's cool. But again, for the average person, they have no idea what that means. They have no idea how that works. They have no idea if it's reliable and how we know how reliable it is. And so, when a scientist talks about it, it's just, oh yeah, of course we know that, because, they've been studying this stuff for decades. They've been using the tools. They've seen how accurate and reliable these different methods are. They know what to look out for as far as pitfalls and problems and corrupt data sets and things like that. Whereas your average person who doesn't have a background in science education, outside of maybe reading a few science blogs and stuff, or researching a few things on the internet, they're not going to have the slightest clue. And so my goal is to try to make that information accessible to the public, so that when they see it, they can be like, oh, okay, that's why we believe this or don't believe that. And it's not just science. My most recent series I've been doing is called Nothing Fails Like Bible History, and I've been covering kind of the archaeological evidence and historical evidence for and against the Bible. And so that's been a really interesting dive for me, because while science has been my first love, you can use the scientific method when approaching fields like archaeology and paleontology and stuff, and you can start to peel back the layers and say, how reliable is this evidence, and is there actual good reason to believe this? And so far, I'm coming away feeling much less like the Bible is a historical textbook and more like it is legend and mythology slapped on top of a couple of real places, or a couple real tribes who are vastly twisting and exaggerating and turning slight little nuggets here and there into legend.
I don't think you would typify your work this way, but if I was going to, I would say perhaps what you do is inoculate people against stupidity.
I don't think it's necessarily stupidity. I think it's ignorance.
Sure.
Because, I didn't suddenly get a higher IQ when I became an atheist. I think that I learned the tool set for critical thinking, and that led me to becoming more skeptical of claims, which eventually led me to renouncing my faith. I don't think that people who are brought up with a particular religious belief are stupid. I
Right.
think it's more that they haven't really taken a dive in. And when you do take the dive in and you try to figure out, is this a reliable way of knowing things? Is this information good? Are there flaws here? Am I falling prey to my personal biases? Am I falling prey to my cognitive delusions and stuff? Like, then you start to kind of realize that, hey, there's something else going on here. There's a lot of confirmation bias. There's a lot of we fall prey to the blowback effect, where someone tells us information, but we're so emotionally ingrained in something, we've invested in it, and it's a sunk cost to walk away from it at this point. And so we'd rather cling to what we want to believe because we've invested so heavily in it that we kind of put our blinders up and don't listen. And I think that happens with all of us. So
I think this is what's
thing.
Right. I think this is what's so important about your work and people who are on YouTube or entertainers in general, is that you're right. We do have the blowback effect, where if you give people too much information or even some information, if you don't Trojan horse that with something that's entertaining, either a joke or a funny little video or animation, it can be a difficult medicine to swallow.
Yeah, and I think even there's certain emotional walls that have to come down first. I know in my own journey away from religion, I first had a couple shifts where, one, I had a youth pastor who was talking to me and said, you know what, if you stop believing in, a young earth creationist model, you can still be a Christian and acknowledge all of the evidence for evolution. You don't have to just, deny it. And so I was like, okay, I can kind of make that shift and I can still hang on to my faith. But then I had another Christian friend who was like, if the Bible is true, truth withstands scrutiny, so we shouldn't be afraid to ask these hard questions. Our goal should be the truth. We should want to believe what's true and not, sit in blissful ignorance, relishing our delusions. And so those shifts, I think, for me, helped me to be able to really explore it without hesitation. And there were still emotional barriers and stuff, and they kind of slowly came off. But I think when we reach out to someone, we need to bear that in mind, that if we're having a conversation, and some of the religious beliefs can be quite harmful. And if we're talking to someone, say, about bigotry against, the members of the LGBT plus community, then, rather than just being like, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe, I don't think we get anywhere with that. I think that's name calling. It pushes people away and they just see us as outraged. And they're like, but, my Bible is trying to protect the fabric of society. But I think if you start talking with them first in terms of, you believe in a loving God, don't you? And a loving God wouldn't want people to suffer. Like, if let's say that hell exists and God is loving, are these two compatible? And if they have these shifts where they suddenly realize, hey, an omnibenevolent God would never make an eternal punishment for a finite crime. Hell must not be therefore an eternal punishment. And then you start showing them kind of the history of hell and how it's changed over time, and how in Judaism there wasn't really a notion of hellfire and eternal punishment like there is in the New Testament. Then all of a sudden they start to make this shift away from it and think, well, maybe God is more about love. Maybe God is, and then you start, kind of questioning the notion of, well, if God is about love, then wouldn't he more be inclined to accept a critical thinking, skeptical person who wants to believe the truth no matter what, who just doesn't come to the conclusion that he exists, rather than taking someone who's purely hedging a bet and doing it on insurance, like, oh, well, if God exists, I don't want to burn in hell. Well, I think that a God who is in any remote sense intelligent would find that kind of person insufferable. So it's like these kind of shifts will then show people that these positions that they hold, not just that they aren't logical, but from an emotional standpoint, is that really the type of God? Is that really a God that you can even call loving, that you can relate to in any kind of sense as someone who is compassionate? And those little shifts, and again, this isn't comprehensive in any sense, but it kind of gives you an idea of, how to reach people and how to connect with people effectively. Like, does it feel good in a way to just get angry and lash out at someone for being, or saying something that is, offensive or awful? Sure, it does. But is it tactful? Is it effective? And I understand there's times when we're kind of at our wits' end and frustrated and emotionally spent, and sitting down with someone who holds a bigoted position may not be in the interest of our mental health. It may not be something where we are in a position to do it. And I understand that. So I'm not saying that everyone has to, sit down and empathize and listen to someone while they completely berate you and bash you with bigotry. And that's not what I'm condoning, just to be
sure,
cover that. But
I think it sounds like you're trying to build bridges and trying to do communication in a in-your-face kind of way. And the good thing about YouTube is that you can be there for when the person is ready to hear you, or ready to listen to you, or ready to watch you.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about the medium. Thomas, good place to pivot into the best advice you ever got.
The best advice I ever got. Ooh. I don't know. Like, I think that there's so many different small pieces that form a foundation. And, I look at advice that I got from my parents at a young age, and I remember them saying, you can be anything that you want to be, which is kind of a typical, millennial type of notion. I wonder if they would have said that if they knew that I was going to turn out to be an atheist activist.
Right. Because they were missionaries.
They were missionaries. So maybe the you can be anything you want to be wasn't exactly. Yeah. They didn't know what I was going to be, or they might not have said it. But I think that the best advice that I probably ever got was, and I can't summarize it in just one quote, but it was probably the notion of, I was reading a book called Moonwalking with Einstein, and the book is a search for who is the smartest person in the world. And over the course of that book, he basically shows how people who are even in the World Memory Championship, they're not born with these innate talents, they develop them. And so I think that the best advice that I ever got was the notion that humans who succeed typically have a growth mindset. You're not born with everything given to you. You have to work hard for it. And over the course of my YouTube career, as well as my, career in IT and college career and stuff, I think realizing that I wasn't the smartest kid. I didn't have the most amazing education when I was in high school, but that didn't have to stop me, that didn't have to limit me, that I could actually go out and learn things, oftentimes for free, oftentimes online. Sometimes Ivy League schools have free courses on Coursera or edX or other places, but just realizing that I'm not stuck, that I don't have to be limited by the talents I was born with when there are skills that I can develop. I think such a crucial mindset to have.
You're spot on with that. There is this toxic tendency for a lot of people to just think intelligence is set in stone, and that you really can't improve yourself, that you're just basically given a certain set, either from your history or by genetics, and you can't really move on beyond that.
Yeah. I guess if I had to summarize it in a quote, it would be that I'm grateful that my mom didn't just say you're a smart kid, but that she told me you can learn anything.
Right. I remember hearing studies that say that stated that when you compliment a child, you don't say something as much as, you are smart, as much as you can say that, of course, and that's fine. But it's about you did well.
You worked
hard at this. And as a father, that's what I've done with my kids too, because you want to instill this kind of resilience, right? Some kind of psychological resiliency in them, because you can be smart, but you have to be resilient to be successful, or just to get along in this world.
Oh, yeah. And I think that doesn't just apply to technical skills. I think it applies to social interactions and social relationships. We were talking about how to have an effective conversation, and I think when it comes to communications, most people don't realize that if you go to college for a communications degree, you're not just learning grammar. If you go to study social psychology or behavioral economics, you're not just going, to study, numbers or to study, psychology or something. You're trying to figure out what is the most effective way to communicate with people, to reach people, to, rather than conquer your enemies, to actually build relationships and to, have allies where you can effectively accomplish more, where you can actually have win-win situations, where you can actually both come out on top, where you can actually accomplish the things in this life that are difficult, that are hard to, and get the best possible result. And that's a skill. That's a huge skill. Like nobody's born with it. You look at toddlers on the playground and they're like, nah, that's mine. And they're selfish and they're, fighting and stuff. And they don't know how to get along. They don't realize that, they'll burst into tears if someone says something the wrong way. They don't know how to listen charitably. They don't know how to give someone the benefit of the doubt. They don't know how to, be less insecure about everything and how to actually, talk to people in ways, maybe changing your words, altering your words just slightly, using synonyms or rearranging a sentence or something in a way that is more effective at communicating. And I think that when you understand that sometimes the reactions that people have in situations are not just their fault, that you have a role, you start to take personal responsibility. That doesn't mean everything's in your control. That doesn't mean that everything is your fault. But it means that when you start to take responsibility, then you start to acknowledge that there are things that you can affect, that you can change about your approach and how you do something. And I think that is more of a winning mindset. And when there's something you can't control, you learn to have the grace to accept it. But for the most part, there's almost always something that you can do to improve. And that's something I'm still learning. Like I screw up all the time with, communication and relationships. And I try to build more bridges than I burn, but sometimes I fail. And, we do our best. We gather, ourselves back up and keep going and learn and move forward. And I think that the growth mindset, you can work hard, you can improve at everything, at social interactions, at technical know-how, at all of it. I think that is probably the best advice and the best kind of the winning mindset that I think if people come away with one thing, that's what I would encourage them to.
Fantastic. I think that was great advice. Having that growth mindset, being resilient, always learning. Sage words of wisdom, my friend.
Thank you.
We should touch back on the Faithless Forum. When is that happening and where again?
The Faithless Forum is going to be June 19th to the 21st this year, 2020, and it will be in Austin, Texas. So we have Austin is a fun city. For anyone who is a little bit hesitant about, it's Texas. It's not really Texas. You got Austin and then you've got the rest of Texas. It's this little oasis, where you've got beautiful, rivers and lakes and tons of, restaurants and bars and nightlife and weird, fun art, live music, tons of festivals and stuff. And it's kind of little bit of a liberal bubble, not quite as liberal as like Portland or somewhere, but compared to Texas standards, it is. And the hotel, it's in the Hilton. And it's a very nice venue, but it's also within walking distance of, I think, like 700 different, bars and restaurants and food trucks and stuff where people can get, a feel for what it's like in Austin if they want to kind of explore, get there a day early, stay a day late or something. It's right, not too far, I think, walking distance from the Texas state capitol. And we're doing it, getting in Friday. We'll have kind of an open, mixer, get to meet everyone. And one of the things that I would say is different about our conference is that we really, 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 really want to emphasize involvement and interactivity. And we don't want people to just show up, sit down, and feel like they're being talked at. We want the audience to feel like they are welcome, they are a part of it. And, not like a cult-like family or whatever. But at the same time, we want it to be fun. You go, you play some games, you make some friends, you come away and you come back next year and you get to see people who, you feel like you're not in a room full of strangers.
You want to have a sense of community.
Yes. And
Fantastic.
I think it was last year. I think Eric said something like, there are no strangers here, only friends you haven't met yet. And so from the get-go, our goal is to set the tone of the conference by having games that people can play, workshops, they'll meet and greet the speakers, and everyone just feels, like they're there to, not feel so alone, especially
Sure.
for people who are coming from super religious communities where everyone at their work and their family and their friends are all super religious. And then they come here and they realize, I'm not going crazy. There is a growing movement to push back against a lot of the insanity that's out there.
Sure. Where can people find you online, sir?
Well, me personally, I'm on Twitter at Holy Koolaid. My YouTube channel is Holy Koolaid, where I upload all my videos, as well as Facebook, Holy Koolaid. It's all aggregated on holykoolaid.com. For the conference, faithlessforum.com is where you can go to get more information, see the speakers list, the tentative schedule, and purchase tickets and everything. And that's also on Twitter and Facebook is Faithless Forum.
Well, Thomas Westbrook, thanks for coming on The Best Advice Ever. This has been a great conversation, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for having me on.